Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into the post-Super Bowl, pre-free agency, used to be called baseball season around here, but I don't know what we're going to call it. Luke Jones joins us now from high on a hill in Pennsylvania. It's been a little while, and just like old times, we go to the Super Bowl, Tom Brady wins. We don't go to the Super Bowl and Tom Brady wins. But either way, this is a time of the year where the Ravens, really start to do some soul searching and looking at who they are and where they are and salary cap and where the league is and measuring everyone. And there's always somebody leaving the island, right?
Yeah, and it feels like more often than not, as much as you try to lay out and envision how your offseason is going to go, there's a surprise somewhere along the way. Some years it's a guy who gets hurt in the spring. You think of Terrell Suggs tearing his Achilles right around the draft back in 2012. But I think it's very evident for the Ravens in this offseason. It's become very evident just looking at Orlando Brown's Twitter account over the last few weeks. It's going to be what happens with him. He very clearly wants to play left tackle. He played left tackle at a pretty high level in place of an injured Ronnie Stanley, which was as much as we were dwelling on some of the deficiencies of the offensive line. I mean, he did a fantastic job there, and he wants to play left tackle. And some of it is tied into his relationship, of course, with his late father, Zeus Sr., and certainly there's a financial element to this that he's going to downplay, but I think we all, we're not naive. We understand that left tackles get paid at a higher level than right tackles, and he wants to be traded because he knows he's not going to be the left tackle here in Baltimore. So if you're the Ravens, I think
so much for he's a Raven. He's a real Raven. This is a weird thing because every team in the league passed on him 3 times before the draft. So I mean, the Ravens are really giving him an opportunity as much as anybody, right?
Well, sure. And I mean, they drafted him in the 3rd round. It's not as though they took him at the end of the 1st. But yeah, there were some questions about him. And to his credit, I mean, this guy is a 2-time Pro Bowl selection in his 3 seasons. He's earned a big opportunity as far as once he hits the free agent market. And in his mind, even though I think you could certainly debate and dispute this notion, in his mind, he wants to play left tackle now, because once he hits free agency, or if he's dealt to another team and they give him a big contract immediately, that's going to look more attractive being a left tackle rather than a right tackle.
Let's just call it what it is. It's a business.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to be – there is an element here with his father, and I think, you and I both have affinity for our fathers and, lost too soon and all of that.
I have an affinity for his father, as a matter of fact.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I totally am empathetic of that, but also he understands there's a business side to this. And, I even go back to the end of the 2015 season to give a kind of a recent example for the Ravens. Kelechi Osemele, remember, he played, the final 4 games at left tackle that year. And he ended up getting a deal on the open market with the Raiders that put him in the top 5 of all offensive linemen. Now, he ultimately stayed at guard, but that value showing that you could play tackle helped him immensely. And I think that's something that helped him. So if you're Orlando Brown, you're looking at this and saying, look, I want to play left tackle anyway. That's what I played in college. That's what my father wanted me to play. And I know I'm going to get paid at a higher level. For every Lane Johnson, there's 5 or 6 Laramie Tunsil's, Ronnie Stanley's, go down the list.
Well, he doesn't need to be the number 1 left tackle in football. He could be number 12 and still be compensated.
Well,
right?
He'll be higher than number 12, but say he's number 4 or number 5 or number 6, that's still going to do way better than your top 3 right tackles.
Well, let's see, right? I got into this with Dennis last week about players and who is what. I remember telling about Ed Hartwell couldn't play on 3rd down. It wasn't my opinion. That was the coach's opinion because they weren't playing him.
Right.
In the case of Orlando Brown, we'll find out if he's a left tackle, right? Like the league will tell him that we need to have you and we want to pay you, and we want to give the Ravens compensate, all of that, right? Or no, you're probably an elite right tackle, but you're just an okay left tackle.
Yeah, and I think the league will view him as a left tackle, but here's the rub, and this is where it comes back full circle for Eric DeCosta, who's going to say, look, if we can get a great deal that's going to make it worth it for us to surrender the value that you bring as our right tackle / backup left tackle to our franchise left tackle who's coming off of a major ankle injury, then yeah, we'll deal you and we'll accommodate you. But we're not going to trade you for a third round pick because that just doesn't make any sense. And that's not going to help our chances to win in 2021.
And
So
no
that's where,
one's giving us a one for
well,
you.
well, that's where it remains to be seen. If someone truly does view him as a legit, high-profile, high-end left tackle, have we seen teams do those things in order to basically have the right to buy a free agent, the rights to a free agent, and then pay them? Time will tell. As I joked and as I wrote at BaltimorePositive.com, kind of opining about this over the last week, short of Bill O'Brien sneaking into a front office again, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get that top half of the first round pick. Certainly not
I'm
going to
not
get
going to let my backup left tackle run my franchise, Luke.
certainly not going to get 2 first rounds and a second the way that he gave up for Laramie Tunsil, which, hey, the Dolphins are like, sure, great, take him. We're happy to give you him. So that's where I think it is interesting looking at it from the Ravens' perspective, certainly being mindful of not wanting to have someone who doesn't want to be here. At the same time, Orlando Brown's been a professional from the moment he stepped foot here. It certainly doesn't behoove him to be a malcontent or to hold out, which could impact his free agent
Well,
status post
malcontent starts on
2021.
the internet, right? That's like,
Well, but
I
look,
know he's not happy, so he becomes a malcontent when the whole world knows he's not content, right? Literally, right?
Well, and to be clear, there's a difference between wanting to be traded and becoming a malcontent or becoming unprofessional. So, I think we need to be clear about that.
Fair
And
enough.
look, there have been plenty of guys who have played a season for the Ravens knowing they weren't going to come back, knowing they didn't want to come back, knowing the money wasn't going to be there. So this is just a case where he's taken it public. I think the Ravens were initially caught off guard, but I think both sides still share a good relationship. And I think if you're the Ravens, if you're Eric DeCosta, this is where you have to weigh 1 year of a sure thing, and then assuming he gets the kind of deal that I would anticipate him getting, even if a team's not sure about him being a franchise left tackle. Let's just say they know he can play at a really high level, whether it's left tackle or right tackle. He's going to get the kind of deal that would warrant a third-round compensatory pick for 2023. By the time next year he'd hit the market. So,
and again, we go back to the Ravens where like Eric DeCosta can trade picks for 23 because he believes he'll still be here. That doesn't happen in most franchises.
Sure, but at the same time, this is where you do need to weigh this. This is a team that's a championship contender, and you need to weigh the value that you're going to get for Orlando Brown playing for you in 2021.
That's where I am, dude. You want off my island? We might win a championship next year. What's wrong with you, dude? You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of that in
it's not. Yeah, I mean, I hear you on that, but but what I'm talking about here is you do want, in a perfect world, yeah, you'd love to maximize your long-term value here in the investment you made in a third-round pick who's been a starter from not day one, but halfway through his rookie season. So that's where I think it is tough for the Ravens because, let's face it, this is a championship caliber team, but it's a team that certainly has some areas they'd like to address. Oh, yeah, it's on the offensive line, so while you can talk about a first round pick or you can talk about getting a veteran player and a third round pick or whatever the ultimate best offer would be, there's still that concept of a quote sure thing, even though there's never truly a sure thing in the NFL, compared to hypothetical long-term value. Because you always think about your first round pick being the next Ronnie Stanley or the next Marlon Humphrey or name your pick of the numerous first round
I'll go with Ed
picks.
Reed, but that's okay.
But you also, there's a great example. Ed Reed, it could also be Matt Elam. And that's where you do look at this.
That was a little silent there for a minute. You got a little quiet, didn't it?
Some emphasis, right? Yeah. So that's the thing. And that's not to say you inflict this fear that you're paralyzed to make a move, but you do have to weigh this in terms of what exactly is Orlando Brown worth to the Ravens in 2021, in a year where they clearly, their window is still wide open. Not that it's going to slam shut, but we know financially it's going to get more challenging. It already has and will continue over the next couple years as you pay Lamar Jackson, as you pay Mark Andrews, as you pay all pay.
You're funny. You say
So,
slam shut. I'm thinking, but it is like getting more ajar the more that they have
well,
to
but
pay every
right, but
player,
that
right?
it gets more difficult. So, how much do you value having another answer on your offensive line as opposed to we've already talked about center being a question mark. We've been talking about right guard being a question mark from the moment Marshall Yanda retired, 11 months ago, even before that, knowing he wasn't going to be coming back most likely. And now,
And keeping
if
in
you
mind, we're still drafting linebackers to replace Ray Lewis around here.
sure, but then if you're going to trade Orlando Brown, and okay, let's say they get a first round pick, second half of the first round, and now you have 2 first round picks. You're still talking about wide receiver. You're still talking about center. You're still talking about right guard. They have very few edge defenders under contract right now, so we're talking about that position. So even if you trade and even if you get a first round pick, you're deliberately opening up another big hole in this football team. And as I mentioned, oh yeah, it's not just your right tackle, it's your backup left tackle who you have no other options right now. And Ronnie Stanley, are we 100% convinced that not that he'll come back, he's going to come back, but is he going to be 100% pre-injury Ronnie Stanley week 1 in 2021? Or is he going to be a guy that, struggles a little bit, mobility isn't quite as good, and by the end of the year he's back to normal? So, and by the way, we know Ronnie Stanley has missed games even before the ankle injuries. He's been someone who's been good to miss a game or two most seasons. So, it really is one of
He's
those.
not a gigantic guy for being a left tackle. Like when
No,
you
no.
stand him next to John
I mean,
Ogden,
he's
it's a different
huge.
thing.
I mean, let's be clear. I mean, he's still huge, but yeah, sure. I mean, I hear where you're going with that, but I think it really is a case of if you're the Ravens, you have the leverage here. I mean, you really do. And this should not be a case. Many people will kind of cite what happened with Hayden Hurst last year, where he clearly wanted a bigger role. He asked Eric DeCosta to trade him, and Eric DeCosta was willing to accommodate. And it worked out nicely. They ended up picking J.K. Dobbins with one of the picks they got in that trade. So that worked out. But it's a little bit different talking about your number 2/number 3 tight end compared to your Pro Bowl right tackle and your backup to your left tackle, who you just gave a ton of money to, who was also coming off of a major ankle injury. So I think if you're the Ravens, you need to be really picky here because you have the leverage. And even if Orlando Brown is unhappy if he doesn't get traded, it makes
I'm
no
trying
sense
to
for
feel
him.
the upside of what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like I don't know how they're going to trade Orlando Brown and make their offensive line better right now.
Well, and that's the big question because again, first round picks, we always romanticize picks. And look, picks are the lifeblood of building a contender and sustaining it. We understand that. I'm not being disparaging of draft picks, but we also have to understand when you are trading a sure thing, and even though it's 1 year, it's 1 year of really high value. You want to look at different concepts like we think about in baseball, like wins above replacement. You could make an argument that Orlando Brown was the second most valuable player on the team last year behind Lamar Jackson because of what he did. So I think that's where you need to be really careful in not overlooking that element and understanding that, yeah, if he plays out the final year of his deal, you're only going to get at best a third round compensatory pick in 2023. But if you do trade him, and even if you get a first round pick, and even though it looks like this draft does look pretty good in terms of offensive tackles, which would be good news if you're suddenly in the hunt for a right tackle, that's still not a guarantee that that guy's going to be there when you're picking. And also, let's keep in mind, this is going to be another one of those unusual off seasons where you're not going to have your usual OTAs, usual mandatory minicamp. And let's hope by training camp, it's looking more normal than it was this past season. But there's that element. And I think you and I would both agree probably of all the positions on the field that probably missed not having a spring and a normal summer, probably offensive line, just based on how coaches have talked about it in normal terms over the last 6-7 years, really since the start of the last CBA, which was 2011. So that's where you do look at this and say, okay, you can maximize your future potential value, knowing that it's an unknown, whoever you're going to pick. But now you're talking about center, you're talking about right guard, and you're talking about right tackle. And look, I'm not going to say that Patrick McCary or Tristan Colon Castillo or Ben Powers or Ben Bredesen, out of that group, I'm not going to say that there isn't at least maybe one answer, maybe two, but the point is it's such an unknown that we were already talking about the offensive line, and now you're looking at the potential of trading your right tackle, your Pro Bowl right tackle. That's where you do look at this and say, let's not look too far down the road in terms of the future if you're really short-circuiting your chances to win in 2021, knowing that this roster is not getting any cheaper as it is.
Well, it's, I don't know a monkey wrench, but certainly they gave Stanley the money. The injury happened. I don't think that Eric DeCosta would have thought he would have had a fidgety Orlando Brown at left tackle at this time. I don't know that it was something that was predictable for them. Predictable for him, I guess, that, he wants to be a left tackle and make money. But the notion that the franchise is in any way that there's any dance partner for this, or that this isn't something we just wasted 15 minutes of breath on sports radio about, that doesn't make sense to Eric DeCosta, I would say, to some degree, other than, you said malcontent. You don't want a guy on the team who doesn't want to be on the team, and especially when, I don't know, this was a little unorthodox, I would say, Luke. That's just what I would say.
Yeah, it does remind you a little bit of a little more of a NBA player type culture, trying to force the issue a little bit more. And look, again, it's a business, and it's a business for both sides. That's why I said, if you're Eric DeCosta, you're not just looking at this and saying, "Oh, Orlando, we love you. Yeah, we're gonna trade you no matter what, even if the best offer out there is kind of lukewarm in terms of a return," because another team looks at it and says, "Look, we're hesitant to give up a first-round pick, because it's not just giving up a first-round pick. We're also going to have to sign you right away, because you don't want to be in the position Bill O'Brien was with Laramie Tunsil last year around the draft, when
I just think
he
Orlando Brown has a really high
check.
opinion of himself if he thinks somebody's going to give up a one and then go pay him $150 million. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's really, like, if that happens, good for him and good for the Ravens. But I don't know.
I will say this. It's really easy to say that when you have a franchise left tackle, and when you don't, and you're kind of looking at that as the missing piece. And I think that's where you look at a team like Indianapolis, for example, just had their left tackle retire. They do have cap space, but is that highly respected front office willing to give up a first-round pick, knowing you're going to have to sign the guy? And look, there've been organizations that have done that in recent years, and that's why this is such a great debate as far as trading an unknown high ceiling but also low floor asset, because you can draft a player that's a bust for a sure thing, so to speak, in quotes, because we know it's never 100%. But look at what the Rams have done the last few years. They've gone through first round picks like they're pieces of candy. They just burned through them to acquire Jalen Ramsey and now Stafford. And you go down the list of guys that they've acquired in that way. So it is an interesting case study in terms of looking at those picks, in terms of whether you actually use them or whether you trade those picks to get, quote, known commodities. And that's where it is interesting for the Ravens being on the other side of this, where you would feel like you'd like to maximize the present. You don't want to throw away the future. I'm not suggesting that, but even if you keep Orlando Brown, you're still going to get a third-round compensatory pick, in all likelihood. So, and I think from his perspective, he clearly wants to play left tackle. One, because of what he says about his father, but two, and I think this is where you really look at it, the financial side of this. But I also feel, if you're him, and this goes to the point you just made about, you have a team that's Super Bowl ready, a team that's at least a top 5 contender as far as how they're viewed around the league. So, I think there's also a reality here too. If you play right tackle, teams aren't going to forget that you played left tackle in 2020 at a really high level in the second half of the season. And oh yeah, Ronnie Stanley is coming back from a major injury and typically has missed at least a game or two, and we can plug you in there and you're going to play. So it's not as though you can't continue to showcase your skills here in Baltimore. So again, I think this is still a case where the Ravens are very much negotiating from a place of power. I think they are willing to accommodate, but it has to be a deal that, and I think the difference here compared to the Hayden Hurst trade is, if I'm Eric DeCosta, I'm not looking for a fair deal. I'm looking for an advantageous deal where I love what I'm getting back. Not where I'm saying, okay, this works for both sides. I'm loving what
He's
I'm
a
getting back.
starter. You think you're a
Yeah,
Super Bowl team. I mean, come on.
exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
this is
So,
where I get off that in February, in this building, we talk about winning a championship. We don't talk about the next team we're going to play for.
sure.
You
Well,
start talking about the next team you want to play for. Uh,
but
that's it's
but
just
they're
not
also
good. It's not
but they
good.
also
And when I call it unorthodox, I've been doing this a long time. So have you, Luke. This doesn't
right.
happen every February here.
I hear you. At the same time, they've already thrown Mark Ingram out the door. They're going to inevitably they're going to either cut a couple other guys here or there. They're going to let someone go that everyone was expecting them to re-sign. Someone's going to be, a couple guys have already taken pay cuts, so it is a two-way street. I hear you though. It is, for a guy on a rookie contract, it is a little more unorthodox. But as I mentioned, that's where I think you do see what's happened in the NBA over the last several years, where players, it's really become such a player-driven league, and guys really trying to force the issue, getting dealt a certain place,
Well, we
forming.
got quarterbacks in the league doing that right now.
Well, and
Right?
that's what I said. I mean,
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson right now, and look, I understand that the Texans just gave him a deal last fall, but I mean, that organization is an absolute disaster right now. So if you're Deshaun Watson, and this is the difference between Deshaun Watson, a quarterback, a franchise multi-time Pro Bowl quarterback, compared to a right tackle. The quarterback is maybe the one spot that can use that power play, and it'll probably end up working out for him in the end, I assume. For Orlando Brown, again, the Ravens aren't going to trade him just for a late second round pick, or nor should they. I mean, if they end up trading him and they get the 56th pick in the draft, then shame on the Ravens. I think that's a bad move. I don't think that's maximizing your short-term value as far as what you are as a football team in 2021.
If they were to do that, it would tell me they don't like the kid. I mean, seriously, it would tell me they were ready to get rid of him. Because there should be no garage sale on Orlando Brown. Around.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, the quality of the player is higher than that. And again, you can say, well, you're getting better. That's better than a third-round comp pick in 2023. But I'd say, yeah, but you're missing out on all that value in 2021 of him being on your football team. There's still, this time of year, we always think of picks and we think of cap space, but ultimately these are still living, breathing human football players who are going to be out on the field either helping you win games or not. So that's where Orlando Brown still has a ton of value, even if you are looking at it pragmatically and saying, all right, clearly we're not re-signing him because, one, we can't pay him after we just paid Ronnie Stanley, and two, he wants to play left tackle anyway, and that's not happening either. So you understand that this is a finite timeline with him. It's one more year, and that's that. But that one more year could be the difference of your offensive line, taking the next step. If you plug in another, a right guard, a standout center, whoever it might be, and now you're getting over the top and you're winning a Super Bowl.
What's amazing to me, dude? When's the last time somebody asked out of here? I mean, it's almost arrogant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know I'm thinking more and more about it. I'm like, it hasn't happened, and you can go NBA all you want, but this is the place where I spend time on the phone with Brandon Stokely, Matt Burke, last week with you. Just go down the list of these guys that have played. I mean, Jack Del Rio's in Washington right now. Doesn't even have a friggin' logo. He's got a hell of a defensive player, though. We talked about that, but these people, they all want to be in Baltimore for whatever reason. You say what you want about the Ravens, say what you want about Eric or John or Steve or the color purple, or how I feel about Baltimore and you feel about Baltimore is one thing, but it is very, very unusual for someone to say, I don't want to play for the Ravens. I want to go over there for whatever reason, because you're not going over there for a better chance to win. You're going over there for money. And talking about that in February around here, I don't know. It might get you invited off the island. And, it may be. Well, it just might. It's strange. I call it unorthodox, but I'm thinking about the history of it. I don't want to call it unprecedented, but I would call it doing it publicly is a little more unprecedented.
Right. I was just going to say, I don't think it's unprecedented, but to go public, to use social media. And again, I mean, it's not as though
before Valentine's Day.
But it's not, I mean, to be
Brady
clear,
hadn't even thrown the trophy from one boat over to the other boat yet, for crying out loud.
Which was pretty amazing in and of itself. But you're right. I don't think it's unprecedented in terms of just simple wish and in terms of looking at it from a business standpoint. But yeah, the public stance. And again, let's be clear. He's been very complimentary. He followed up that initial "I am a left tackle" tweet where he had it in all caps with saying that Eric DaCosta has treated and the organization has treated him very well. It's not a case where he's said, I don't like the Ravens or anything like that. But yeah, it is unusual. And to your point, it has been pretty rare. I mean, there have been guys that fall out of favor with the coaching staff. Guys aren't playing as much. There are plenty of guys that have been ready to check out. By the time they hit free agency, and they see the writing on the wall as much as anything.
If they're not playing, if somebody's in the way, and obviously somebody's in the way here for him, and it's his career. He can do it, but this is.
It is a little unusual. Sure, I agree, and that's where I keep coming back to, short of the culture concern, the football culture concern, which it's real. I don't know how you quantify it year after year, but it's real. But short of that, the Ravens have all the leverage here, because it does not behoove him to hold out, have a lousy season, dog it, show up out of shape, and you get hurt. It certainly serves him well that if they don't find a trade partner for him to show up and play his butt off and be ready to play left tackle at a high level, if Ronnie Stanley tweaks his ankle again or has a hamstring, whatever it is. Like I said, he's missed some games over the course of his career, even before the ankle injury, and to make another Pro Bowl. And if he does that, I suspect he will, at the very least, have a great chance of becoming the highest paid right tackle in the league. And I think
I remember how much money Ricky Wagner got, and that was like 5 years ago, right?
Yeah,
so there's a lot of money to be made at right tackle, right?
There is, but not as much as left tackle. And that's very clear. Even people will point to the Lane Johnson deal in Philadelphia. If you recall, he was signed to that deal with the thought at that point in time that he would eventually be shifting over to left tackle when Jason Peters retired. And that hasn't worked out. And of course, the Eagles are in such a transitional phase at this point. Who knows what's going to happen there? But aside from Lane Johnson, right tackles haven't gotten the money that even sniffs top 10 left tackle money. So I get that. I totally understand that. But again, he has to understand from the Ravens' perspective that this isn't trading a role player that you're trying to accommodate, because why not? Because you'll see if another team values him at a higher level than the Ravens do. This is a case where if this makes sense to do it, it needs to be that it makes so much sense that you're not taking very much of a hit now, and you are maximizing your long-term value at a really high level, because there are no guarantees. And whether that deal is for a first-round pick, whether it's a team, I've seen some people talk about Jacksonville with DJ Chark, who would clearly be an upgrade at wide receiver for the Ravens. If they traded Chark and then a second-round pick, would that, is that something that would entice you because it'd be an early second-round pick? Sure, maybe. And maybe the Ravens would have to throw in a day 3 pick to kind of balance that out. So, but as I said, this is not a deal. If I'm Eric DaCosta, I'm not looking for, quote, fair value here. I'm looking for value where I'm really excited, where I feel that a team has overpaid a little bit to get my guy. And we're going to take advantage of that. And we're going to put ourselves in a position that we can draft his replacement or sign his replacement and draft some other areas of need, however it shakes out. But again, I am not in a position, if I'm Eric DaCosta, where I'm looking at this and I'm overly eager to open up another hole in my offensive line unless I'm being absolutely overwhelmed here in terms of long-term value.
All right, Luke's around at Baltimore. Luke, you can find him. Before we breathe and break and talk about Pizza John's and our friends at Royal Farms and Planet Fitness and all of our incredibly supportive sponsors during this pandemic, the Jimmy Smith thing, crazy targeting in this, where we are in the country right now financially with safety. Just not what we want to have for headlines on a Tuesday night in Baltimore, for sure.
Sure, and thank goodness he and his family are safe. By all accounts, he informed the organization. They put out the statement on Friday. But I mean, scary. You take a trip from an airport to your hotel in the Los Angeles area, and
which I've done 100 times, by the way.
Yeah, and sounds like he was there the family was followed from the airport. I mean, that's just it's a scary situation for anyone, let alone, someone that's on your football team. And I mean, Jimmy Smith is someone who we know has a past that hasn't been perfect, but he's been with this organization for over a decade now. And he has grown up a lot, at least according to members of the organization. I'm not going to pretend that I know Jimmy Smith intimately well, but it's just regardless of that, it's just something you
I'm
don't want
pro
to see.
Jimmy, by the way. I like Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Smith is a guy we'd be talking about in the Ring of Honor if health just hasn't plagued him, and even with the health issues,
He's
he's
still out
played
there
here a
playing.
decade. He's
He
played here for a decade, right? I mean, so
won a championship.
yeah. So I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, you thank God that he and the family are okay. We'll see if there are any more details that come out of this as far as suspects or anyone arrested, anything like that. But yeah, I mean, a scary situation, and that's why head coaches and GMs and front office people and other members of the coaching staff, they get those calls late at night or the middle of the night in the off season. You're always holding your breath that whether it's an arrest or something like this where a player and his family are targeted. You just pray that nothing bad happens. And the good thing is this could have been way worse. You don't want it to happen, but at least it wasn't something that was far more tragic as far as an outcome.
My dude, stay safe there in Pennsylvania. We're gonna talk some baseball soon. You ready
It
for
still
that?
exists, apparently. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to get some baseball in here. I'm going to talk to – I got to find out all the details of the lease, the long-term 24-month lease.
We'll get into it, yeah.
Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Please take care of our sponsors. Please take care of everybody out there at Baltimore Positive. Don Moeller and I got a whole bunch of stuff up our sleeve. And now that the sports season is over and the baseball season's not here yet, and Luke's watching some Terps, we'll get some Terps in here as well. But we're going to stretch out the conversations. Make sure you throw me a note. If there's somebody you heard on the show, you want to hear back, get some updates, I'm going to be inviting some fun people on over the next 60 or 90 days. We're going to shake things up around here. Hope you're checking out our new website as well and the app that makes it all work at BaltimorePositive.com.